Okay.
Martha, go ahead. I am glad to see you. I am very glad to see you. I love that soil test. And it flips me out that you've got the same soil that we have, basically, except that your pH is a lot better, so you can grow more of that the cool stuff like the camellias and the rhododendrons, which is probably why everybody does it down there in South Carolina. How are you doing today? Go.
Microphone on for just a minute.
Hello.
Say hi.
Hi. Are you are you having 80-degree weather? I think I looked at um the weather your way briefly, and you are 10 degrees hotter than.
I haven't been out much today, so it could very well be that. I've gotten so after all these years, I go out in the early morning to take the trash out. I go out after supper to bring things in and take things out. And the middle of the day, I just look out the window.
For those of you who are here, this is my our dear friend Martha Ferguson, who is in South Carolina now for the last 20 years. Has it been 20 years since you moved down there?
19 and a half. It'll be 20 at the change of the year. Yeah.
And Martha was our master gardener coordinator here in Oakland County. She always said, "I don't know much about gardening, but I know about coordinating." And now
Crack the
she
whip
knows,
and make them work.
and now she knows a lot about gardening down in an area where I've never gardened before. So she's one of the people that I call and check with when someone says, "Well, I have a winter place in the Carolinas, and here's what happens." I go, "Oh, let me check with Martha." Glad you're
Yeah.
here, Martha. Glad you're here. And we have a few minutes before we get officially started, and it looks like I've got things set up properly this time. Last time I had a heck of a problem getting everything squared away. Steve is picking up our dog sitter, so we've got 5 minutes. If somebody's got a question that you would like to deal with now, go ahead and either put it in chat, which I am trying to watch, um, or you can just raise your hand. Let's see. We've set it so that your microphone it should be muted, but in case you turn it on, remember there's a lot of us here and we can only do one at a time. And you can always turn on if your video happens to turn on and you see yourself someplace, just slash your video. It should be slashed. That we tried to set it up that way. If it's slashed, then nobody can see you slurping coffee or doing the things, making faces like my sister Kathy tends to do. Um, and try to find the raise your hand control. Um, the chat is if you click chat, it'll come to meeting group chat. The thing we'd like you to make sure to do is make sure that you are chatting to the meeting group chat. Don't try to chat to Steve, who'll be running the chat when he gets back with our dog sitter in a minute. Um, don't try to chat to me separately. We're not good enough at this to be able to watch the chat and also do the other things we're doing our own chat. So make sure you're going to the meeting group. Steve will see everything that comes to the meeting group and not have to bounce back and forth. Um, if you'd like to speak rather than chat, then, oh, well, I guess I have to finish with chat. When you chat, every time you hit return, it pops up. So remember to type everything you want to type at once and then type return, or you'll end up sometimes getting broken up between other people's chats. Um, but what we'd like you to do is talk. It was really great, especially when I'm editing the video, to hear other voices in here. So all you need to do is find raise your hand control. It's in reactions now in our menu bar. So it used to be in participants. It might still be there. But if you find it and click it, you will pop to the top of our list in the order that people click it. And Stephen and I can see the hand raised there and say, okay, your turn. You go ahead and talk. And then you can click your microphone on. So that's all I have to say about that. And if someone has any questions, just go right ahead. I've been working with Nabil today, and we've got a summary of what happened with the problem there. And actually, we did not have to do much in going back over our records for what kinds of things happen now, or even what was a lot of what was happening in our garden, because there were a lot of people sending us emails, which we love, texts, calls. We even got a letter. Gretchen, thank you. I'm going to put that into the next. Gretchen sent us a chemist's look at hydrangea colors, which is it's always good to see another perspective on gardening. Uh, but if you've got something, we still have 2 minutes, which the 2 Minute Gardener, maybe we should write that book, The 2 Minute Gardener. What can you solve in 2 minutes? It's been beautiful here today. This morning was absolutely the best part of spring. It was that 70-degree, everything had just been washed with the rain. The light was low and coming in and lighting up all the brand new foliage. It was great. And when we came home and said, yes, and that means that it's time that the smorgasbord, the salad bar is open for all the pests and the deer and the rabbits and everything else. So it's a beautiful time, and it's also a time to be jumping on top of problems that are showing up. So welcome to Free for All Friday. We welcome everybody. If we ever get to where we have too many people, we can change our account with Zoom and add a few more. We are celebrating growing, and we're cultivating problem solving. And this is our 6th Free-for-All Friday. We'll be doing this every Friday from 7 to 8, except on the Friday that's right before the first Saturday of the month, because that's when we do our subscribers webinars. We do have a free webinar coming up on June 7th. Some of you who are our subscribers to the webinars remember Pierre and Cheryl Bennerup, who are very good friends and are two of the people who are behind most of what you see at the garden center when it comes to perennials. They really are. They've been there since the beginning of the big boom in perennials in the 70s and the early 80s, and they're still there now. And Pierre really wanted to talk to us about ferns. So on June 7th, we're going to be doing a Free-for-All Friday on ferns. And I guess this is our first chance to ask you to chat. Would you rather have us do that in addition to this question and answer session? Or would you rather have us do it in place of it? If you want to put in chat, I'll read the chat afterwards and count up the votes. Anybody who votes, just vote once. Well, your name will show up in there. We either do ferns instead of questions, or we do questions and ferns, in which case we'll just run them as a 2-hour session. Because we promised Pierre an hour, and he's going to take an hour.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rather easily, probably.
He could go on for days about even a single flame. In fact, he has a couple of times with us. So you know Stephen, and you know me, and you know that we've gardened professionally for 40 years, and we're retired now from actually gardening for other people, but we're still involved in our 30-year program of writing and trying to share what we know, and in return getting a lot back from people. So that's why gardenatz.org exists. We hope you use it. We've been trying to put up all of our writing there and keep it organized so that we can find what we've already written and you can find it, because as you'll see tonight, if we get to that part, I forget what happened last year. Shoot, I forget what I had for breakfast. But we've written a lot of different things. Books, we wrote in magazines. I wrote for 13 years for the Detroit News. For 10 years, we wrote for the Michigan Gardener. Tomorrow, I'm going to the zoo. For 30 years, we gardened at the zoo, and then we switched to the Waterford Library. But our zoo garden is still there, and the stalwart volunteers that were with us are still maintaining it. So tomorrow, I'm going to be there working with them. And we decided to do these Free-for-All Fridays because there are a lot of questions that we get in, and we feel when we answer them individually, which we do, that we're missing the chance to share that information with everybody. And this gives us more chance to share more information. We feel very privileged to have been in and out of thousands, literally thousands of gardens in 40 years, and finding situations that we never would find in a single garden, growing the plants that we choose to grow. So these are open to all. And if you go to our Fridays page, which on gardenatz.org, you can always get to from the home screen, there is the link that is there that you can click and join us. All you need to do is have a computer or a laptop. So yeah, go ahead.
There is a question. I just saw that pop-up question, so I was going to read the question.
Go for it.
You ready? RK says they have an established peony with only one bud this year. No problems with it before. I'm guessing that all the decaying organic material over the years has caused the peony to be too deep for blooming. Any other ideas?
Okay, and she's also voting. Good. If there's only one bloom, take a look at the tips of the other branches that are there. See if there is a little brown bud. Geez, at this point of time, it would only be a little point. If there is a brown, dry point at the top, what happened was your peony got hit by frost. Peonies are very prone to that, actually. And that's one of the places where botrytis first starts and gets into a peony. The whole bit with peonies being too deep, I have not found any evidence that that's true. Sure, if you plant them 6 inches deep when you start out, they're not going to bloom that next year, but they reset themselves each year. Every year at the end of the year, as the days lengthen, the peony stores energy and starch in a bud just below the surface, right where it's supposed to be. So even if you planted them too deep one year, they put themselves at the right level. If you added organic matter and you added 6 inches of organic matter, maybe one year that would do it, but not a gradual accumulation. They're going to keep up with that the same way they would in a field that where soil is building, and just the same way that woodland plants do in the woods where soil is building. So I would look and see, and let us know about that, Chris, because it could very well be something that we haven't run into before and would like to look at it. We're nosy that way.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Bogey's here. Hi, Bogey. I am so glad to see. I feel like I'm just sitting with friends when we're online. I'm really glad that you're here. Look at that beautiful allium. Don't you just love them? We were about 2 weeks early. Now we're about 7 to 10 days early based on what we've seen happen before over the years. And it does mean that there are so many things blooming at once that it's almost hard to see them and get your neck out of joint turning from one way to the other. In fact, Steve goes out and takes pictures and I think, what? That wasn't there yesterday.
So do I.
We have a couple of updates from previous. Oh, that happened to you before, didn't it, Steve? Looks like if I click there. We have a couple updates from our last Free4All Friday and from our last webinar. Last week, we talked about whether the marks on Michelle's baptisia might be from slugs. We now have a picture of what it looks like. You can see the scrapes on the stem. You can also see the scrapes on leaves. And I suggested that Michelle go out at night and see if it was slugs, because that's when you would find them. Michelle picked 100 and I don't have the numbers in front of me, picked 130 off one night, and then picked and threw them into soapy water, and then picked off another 70 the next night. So yes, slugs are in a wet year, especially in a place where, as Michelle described her property, it's low-lying. It's alongside what used to be a stream and now is a drainage. Everything's been put into pipes underground, but it's low-lying, it's heavy soil, and it's a great year for slugs. They multiply real quickly. Slug damage. This is I don't know how it got there. It probably came in on seeds on our shoes. This is a biennial forget-me-not, not the kind we grow elsewhere in our yard. And I let it stay there and have been watching it. This is either slug damage. It might be flea beetle damage because it's only about 15 feet over from where the pumpkins and squash grew in our yard. And flea beetles love those plants. But what they do is they scrape the leaf. So sitting under the leaf, a slug was scraping the underside of the leaf and left just a window pane of tissue, which then turns brown. Slugs work in the middle of the leaf. They don't eat from the edge in. They sit in the leaf and saw with their teeth, scrape with their teeth. So when you see holes in the middle of leaves, go out at night and check. It's worth doing it, even though it's icky to see in most cases. Another follow-up that we had was about 9-bark mildew, and this might be something you don't need to hear or don't want to hear. I certainly didn't want to. We had a request from Squeaks. What could she do about the powdery mildew on her 9-bark? And not having seen much powdery mildew on 9-bark ourselves, we described the usual things that you do with powdery mildew. There is a powdery mildew fungus that can infect 100 or so different species of plants. It's the one that infects your lilac, and that same one can infect your phlox. And what happens is when the conditions are right, when the air doesn't move well, when there's a lot of relative humidity is high in that area, then the mildew can grow. And when we see it after it's been in the leaf for a while. It's been in the leaf growing and consuming the inside of the leaf. And then when conditions are right, it sporulates, it creates spores, and that's the white that we see. This, however, is not the normal look of powdery mildew. And when I looked into powdery mildew, which detoured me from a whole bunch of other things that we were doing, I found an Iowa State bulletin and other bulletins and reports about 9-bark, and I am now incensed with the growers and the breeders who are marketing plants to us. the way that nine bark went was in the 80s. There wasn't much, you couldn't find a nine bark except if you went to a specialty native plant nursery. Um, there were two varieties of the native nine bark. One was gold leafed and one was smaller. Nanus was smaller and gold leafed was called Darts Golden. And those were out there, but that was it. Then in Germany, in someplace in the 90s, one grower had an odd purple-leafed seedling that came up from his nine bark. And he decided, this is cool. People like purple plants. So he grew it. And then he took cuttings from it and propagated it. And people began to cross it with the dwarf one and with the golden one and with the original species and get all these others. Well, the original, that first chance seedling they had was way susceptible to powdery mildew, way susceptible. And every one of the varieties that we're selling now, Diablo and I can't, Summer Wine and all these different ones that are out there, Amber Glow, they all have the genes. They all came from that one plant, and they are all super susceptible. The Iowa State Bulletin is dated 2012 and lists the susceptibility, the relative susceptibility. They're all susceptible to the point of 60% of the plants in a grower's bed had powdery mildew, and most of them had powdery mildew up to 40% of their leaves, which is awful. And yet they just keep putting out more of them and telling us what wonderful plants they are. So it might be that if your nine bark mildews badly, you might want to pull it out and go with something else, because it's going to be a continual problem. And it's really hard to get them the right conditions, as we described, at the edge of a stream where there's water always at the roots and lots of air moving and lots of sunshine. Most of us don't have that kind of place in our yard. Terrible thing that they do to us. And this year in particular, with so much rain, at least in Ohio and here in Michigan, and from what I've heard in Boston, the same thing. Lots of water. The soil is really moist. We're having another one of those years, and it'll probably continue to be one of those years where we see mushrooms in places we never saw mushrooms before.
Okay. There's a question on ideas how to keep those allium leaves from browning so soon while they are still blooming.
Yeah, that's a genetic problem.
That's nature.
Yeah, alliums do that. So does torch lily. The Nepophias do that.
Sure.
Yeah, there are others. It is the cycle of the plant to grow its leaves first, to build up the bulbs, the flower that's in the bulb, and then to send the flower up. So what we do is we grow things around it. We mostly do butterfly bushes. So the alliums come up, and then the butterfly bushes spread out over the top as the alliums are going down. And there are alliums that don't do that. There are alliums that stay green, like the species that gave us Millennium and the curly chives. There are allium species that don't brown out and they do keep their leaves. But the big ones that bloom now, that's pretty much what you got to do. And in a year with a lot of frost, they tend to get pretty tattered by the time the bloom is there.
Lori is wondering, can cedar trees be trimmed anytime, and can they be topped and still live? Our tree trimmer plans to take off maybe 30 feet at the top, as it has lots of broken limbs and don't want more to fall on our shed.
You can plant, and if your cedars are arborvitaes, actually, whether they're the cedar called arborvitae or white cedar, or whether they're the cedar called red cedar, which is a juniper, either one, you can prune them anytime. Not when it's wet. Don't prune them when it's wet.
Especially when it's wet.
And yes, you can top them. We have an illustrated article in what's coming up. If you go to gardenaz.org and go reduce an arb, then you'll come to an article that shows you how to do that, because you're going to end up with a flat top, and you'll have to select a branch to be a new leader, which means that you have to leave from the flat top. You take out all the brown that's in there, all the branches that end in just wood. And then from the branches that have green on them, you select one that has the green closest to the center, and you prop it up above the others or clip the others back so that one is higher than the others and starts becoming your new leader. That's illustrated in that article in Reduce an Arb.
As a backup to the powdery mildew, Lori is seeing it again on Diablo and Summer Wine. Save a Tree is trying to spray to help out, and this is after a severe pruning last year. And then there's a question from Judith. My roses always get black spot as summer progresses, but now the leaves are red and healthy. Is this the time to start spraying? What do you suggest using as a spray?
First for Lori and the spraying the fungicide on the nine barks, that will give you some control. But from what I read in looking at bulletins and what the growers are saying in the growers magazines, you're going to see some mildew regardless. What they do spray with is a preventive. So if there is mildew evident now, that needs to be pruned off or the leaves removed, because the fungicide sprays don't kill an already existing infection of fungus. With roses, yes, if you want to grow a rose with very clean leaves and you're going to use fungicides to coat the leaves, you're coating them as a preventive, and you need to start when the leaves are just coming out, and according to the directions on whichever product you're using, keep it coated so that as the product wears off or as new foliage appears, you're keeping the new foliage covered. It's one of the reasons that we don't do much with roses, Steve and I, because I don't like using fungicides. They are very easy to inhale and very bad for us. So do wear a mask and do not spray on a day when the wind is going to be blowing that fungicide back into your face. My daughter Sonia, who was here on our regular webinars and is a great gardener, always has been, got into roses when she was in elementary school and just loved growing roses. She asked what she could do for that, and we explained to her what happens in many of the English gardens. Every morning, the rose gardener goes out with cotton gloves on, because there might be dew on the leaves, and plucks off every discolored leaf. And they don't then have to spray. But if you want to grow your roses that way, it does work. You can also use baking soda and water. Go to Cornell University's site and they'll give you the recipe. I think it's 4 tablespoons in a gallon of water and a little bit of soap. And that kind of spray you have to put on, and then if it rains, you have to put it on again. So it has not much lasting ability to it. Wilt proof also works as a fungicide, but just like the fungicides, it has to be reapplied to new foliage that came after you sprayed, and it has to be reapplied as it wears off in the in the sunlight.
Lori says, no, the pruning, I guess, from Save a Tree, they are full trees, maybe 60 feet tall. I'm kind of confused.
Well, arborvitae does get that big. So if they're cutting them by half, they're still going to have the same situation. There will have to be a leader established. And
I forgot that previous question. I was just looking at the Save a Tree.
Okay.
Anyway, I got confused very easily. Sorry. Sue has a bed of irises and I'm only getting a few blooms. Does this mean the bed should be thinned, and should it be thinned by 1/3 or 1/2?
When I thin irises, and I assume we're talking about bearded irises, I take all the irises up, take out the good larger rhizomes that have no soft spots in them, and put them back in to space so that they're not touching any other rhizomes. And that usually means that I'm throwing out well over half the mass of the plant. It is a very fast growing species. It tends to overlap on top of itself and crowd itself out. If you divide it and put back in 2/3, you're going to need to divide it next year again. If you divide it and put in half, you get a couple years out of it. If you divide it and put in 1/3 of it, then you're going to get beautiful blooms and some space for them to grow, and you probably get 3 or 4 years before you have to divide them again. No getting around it. They are a gorgeous plant, and a good idea if you've got different colors to put something on the stem of the flowering part to say this was an orange one, because those tend to be the fewest. This was a purple one, and I only need a few of those. This was the white one that smelled good, because you can quickly lose track of that. At least I usually did. And it is traditional and helpful to divide the irises in July after they bloom. I grew, strangely enough, the neighbors that lived next door to us when I was a kid were named the Gardeners. And Mrs. Gardner had irises growing along the side of her house, and she was the corner lot. She would, every year when she divided her irises in July, she would take them out after she divided and decided which ones to keep. She would put them on the sidewalk and let them sit there for a couple of days and bake, which helped kill the spores and the resting bodies of the bacterial soft rot and the leaf spot that could get onto iris. And I know this very clearly because, Lord help you, if you rode your bike down that sidewalk and touched her irises while they were out.
We had one in our neighborhood too,
Yeah, yeah.
on Kendall. It was Mr. Brown. He had the huge garden at certain times. He had them all going right down the sidewalk. I mean, his walk up to his porch, and then some overlapped, and we really had to be careful.
Yeah, yeah. Do not get in trouble with Mrs. Gardner or Mr. Brown. Yeah.
Yeah. Judith says, could we say again what you grow around alliums to disguise the brown leaves? And
Okay.
and quickly, and by the way, you once talked about spray painting the spent blooms. She does it with hers, and Sweet Girls Next Door, every year they do different colors, and the girls love it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to spray paint. And I've been surprised with the colors. I always go for saturated, deep colors, and I found that the pastels really look a lot better. You do wait until they get dry. The alliums and other plants won't take paint while they're still green, but once they get brown, they'll take paint, and it can look good for a long time. If they're in the sun around alliums, we have butterfly bush and also ornamental grasses. So we have little blue stem in some places around the allium. We've got butterfly bush around the others. And we have some allium growing in among potentilla shrubs so that the shrubs are leafing out over the top of the allium. It's a little bit of a tangle, but it works for us. I know some people use daylilies, but I think they get mixed up a little bit too much, and the allium foliage tends to persist and look bad sticking up among the daylilies.
Brenda says her Norway maple has been full and beautiful. This year, only a few branches have beautiful leaves. Some of the branches are just starting to get leaves, and about 1/4 to 1/3 of the tree looks like it's dead.
It's a real good chance that tree, like some others,
Girdled.
well, it might be girdled, but it might also have lost its first set of leaves. Come back there, Janet. We've heard,
Yes.
yeah,
Grand tree trouble.
yeah. We have a striped maple that we have just been so pleased with. That's been pushing out 4 feet of growth a year, and suddenly is dead on one side. And the two of us realized, well, we had that broken pine cut down it by half, and that was what was over the top of the maple on that side. It was creating a screen from frost, infected frost. And what happened is we made a chimney, and it killed the leaves. This is a ginkgo, Maryland's ginkgo. She asked what could be wrong with it. It's been in the ground 2 years and been growing well, and look at it now. It looks like other ginkgos that we know. There's a 70-foot one around the corner from us that is looking just exactly like this. And if you look closely, thank you for high resolution pictures. Anybody who sends them in, send them in full resolution, just the way the camera takes them. Don't let them get downsized, because that lets us look at little details. Like here is the spur that grows the leaves on a ginkgo. And these are the leaves that got killed by the frost. And here are the new ones coming. They're working on it. And because they are dormant buds that are sprouting, they're taking longer than they would otherwise. But if it's doing that, if it's budding out, it's okay. If it's not budding out from those branches that are bare, it could be that it ran into its own roots and it's girdled.
I forgot to tell you, your pointer is rather small.
I forgot to change my pointer. You take the next question while I change my pointer to a bigger pointer.
Okay. Carol wants to know, please recommend small to medium perennial shrubs, ornamental grasses that are minimal reseeders or sterile.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I like the chrysogonum that we have out in front. They're small and low. Peony doesn't reseed, it just grows. Hellebore gets pretty big and goes on. Shrubs, our hypericums, the hypericums are small and nice, and they seem to be doing well. The potentillas we've had are okay. Why am I drawing blanks on others?
Some of those perennials do reseed once they get well established. The hellebores can become quite a ground cover. We're
Oh,
crossing
that's right. I
and
forgot
hoping
about
for it.
weeding those.
Right. Hostas are good medium-sized perennials that they will reseed if they're in a good condition. We have really highly organic soil in the shade, and we get hosta seedlings coming up. They're actually weeds in some cases. It's hard to tell a plant to not do anything. Gas plant is a wonderful long-lived plant, so is peony. And there are shorter peonies like the fernleaf peony that you could grow if you wanted something smaller than the full-size peony.
Tree,
Yeah.
tree peony too, then.
Yeah, because when we go from medium-sized perennial to small shrub, I'm not sure what size it is that you're looking at. Almost all of them will drop some seeds, but I'm looking at goat's beard right here that's at our library garden. It will reseed here and there, and in some cases it'll reseed, as I was saying with the hostas in our yard, it'll reseed a lot. But you need to give it a try and see what happens. Let's see what else we have out there, because we've been trying to grow more things that don't see themselves around. Ornamental grasses. The Calamagrostis Carl Forster is sterile, so it does not seed around, and it's a nice small grass. It's a summer blooming grass, not one of the fall grasses. Golden satin grass, there's a little bit of it coming up over here, and I can show you dividing it shortly, is one that grows like that. I might have to keep telling you as I go through and look at pictures, because it's pictures that tell us most of the time. We go, oh, that's right, we also grow that in that garden. And it's a good question for right now, because we had a question from one of our friends, Joe Steve, called or emailed to say, you didn't warn me about how much it was going to hurt to garden as I got older. He said, I feel sore all over. I need easier things to do. And we exchanged some notes that made me say, okay, maybe it's time to write the actually getting older gardener and list some of these things. Let's see.
Advance the questions pick.
What's the question, Fish? Pick what?
Advance it. We've seen it. You know me. I want to see more. That one too. There, that one's good. There's
Thank you.
Nancy. Nancy says lots of woodpecker holes in bark of a katsura. Horizontal lines, 8 to 10 inches long. Does this hurt the tree? Sapsucker.
Horizontal. Are they holes in a horizontal line? So a dotted line of holes? Because that would be
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that would be a yellow-bellied sapsucker. And they can be a problem in woodlots, places where people are growing for timber, because they cause the plant to have to seal over that area. And of course, you're going to get little knots in each of those holes. If there's a lot of damage, it can hurt the tree. If it's just here and there, it's okay. I remember being worried about our friend Dennis's it's his lacebark pine, isn't it?
It was his lacebark, and it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. I was amazed at how many attacks it had taken, and Dennis telling me I never out here at the right time to catch him. What do you do? Wrap the trunk of the tree in aluminum foil? I'm not sure how you do that, but probably a yellow-bellied sapsucker. And don't worry about it unless it's a lot of damage, in which case then you have to start trying to do the woodpecker scare things. Our neighbor used aluminum pie pans hung in a tree to rattle around and scare the birds. I've also seen people using a mylar ribbon hanging in threads that ripples in the wind and scares them away.
Yep.
But you can.
Yeah, no, we knew that it's individual holes, like somebody took a drill and just went zip, zip, zip. Nancy mentions there's spaces between the holes, not a solid line.
Yeah.
Sorry to imply that we thought it was what it is. It's arranged in a horizontal line.
Yeah.
The holes.
It's a dotted line, indeed.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, while we're talking about woodpeckers, because that is Brenda. Hello. I wondered which Brenda this was. The Southeastern Michigan Butterfly Association is begun by Brenda Zedek, and we talked. Actually, Brenda spoke at one of our webinars a while back, and not too long ago, when we were talking with Sonia about raising butterflies, we showed you images from Brenda's book, Raising Butterflies. No, that's not the right title. She started the Southeastern Michigan Butterfly Association, and she asked if they give any talks on butterflies. We can give talks on what we do, but we would, if you were there, Brenda, we would be deferring to you every couple of minutes to say, what about this one? We're about 30 species of butterflies into knowing when we see them what they are and what they probably live on. And I think you probably know 200 or more. Do you? Raising butterflies and moths in the garden. Thank you. Is related to book. Brenda is a delight. Do you want to go on? Go ahead.
Oh, I know a couple.
I think you do. Last
Yeah.
time I visited you, your entire yard and the house for that matter was full of butterfly plants. Although you live in a city lot, what is it, 50 by 80 or
It's probably 60 by 120 with a 1,500 square foot house and garage and driveway, but my whole front yard and the boulevard is all planted for Lepidoptera, and the whole backyard besides my pond is also. So yeah, I have no idea how many species of butterflies and moths come to my yard. Anyways, we just wanted to ask. My secretary, she just said, "Do you think she'd speak?" And I said, "I'll ask her." And I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're not interrupting. This is exactly what we do: is talk and spread the information among people. And you're not over at the greenhouse managing the butterfly house anymore.
No, I gave the butterfly house to Barson's because I just got too busy, and I'm getting older, and so I gave it to them, and they kept it a butterfly house.
Well, you were the one who turned us on to Plumeria, for instance, because we were looking for something else for the was it the Red Admiral? Red Admiral. Yeah. Here was a weed that I've been pulling out, just like stinging nettle that I've been pulling out. And I said, no, here's a false nettle we can grow, which is great.
Yeah.
I think you drove to Pennsylvania to get the plant, didn't you?
Well, no, to get for the pipevine swallowtail, for the Virginia snakeroot for the pipevine, I ordered that from Nebraska, but false nettle, the lady that was my mentor back 25, 26 years ago, she dug some up out of her yard and gave me the false nettle.
Oh, that's great. This is the picture that's in front here that I went back to. This is our native lupin, which we are growing because it's native on our area. This neighborhood used to be an oak pine barren, and this would be one of the plants that was there, and we are just thrilled that it's taken. We plan on getting some for all the neighbors. Now, once we get it going and established, how do we go about getting a Carner blue butterfly chrysalis or two to get an established? Because I understand that they're endangered. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that won't help. And quite a few years ago, I did some work with the USDA, over in the Manistee National Forest. At the range, I stayed there at the ranger station, and we were evaluating the property where there were the host plants and nectar plants for the Carner blue, and also where there had been some. And so we were redeveloping habitat for them. And I learned Carner blues only travel a very short distance, like from oak savanna to oak savanna. And so no matter how hard I have lupin in my backyard, no matter how hard we try, we really won't get them in our area. We have to be very close to an existing population.
Shoot.
Yeah.
Well, maybe.
But the wild indigo dusky wing sometimes lays their eggs on that, so I keep it there, and the bees love it.
Okay. Well, yeah. I'll give you a call, Brenda, and we'll set something up because it'd be nice to talk to the butterfly people. We're all geeks. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. I'll mute now.
Cool. Ann is seeing garlic mustard everywhere. Are there new strategies to combat them in the region as a whole?
I don't know.
She's kept her yard to just a few.
I don't know of any new strategies. It is a biennial, so it's important to keep the seeds from forming. In clients' yards where we had a lot of it, and a lot of it in the neighboring property, the idea was mow it down before it can set seed. And if it's on the neighbor's property, get them to mow it down too, or ask them, can you mow it down? So cut down the amount of seed that's out there, and then kill or pull the seedlings as they come up the next year. It is a tough plant to do. We had it moving into the Detroit Zoo in our garden from the golf course next door. And what we did is moved outside our garden to the areas outside the fence and along the zoo's railroad. And we smothered all seedlings that were out there. And at least for a while, that seemed to work. I guess I'll find out tomorrow morning when I get to the zoo whether we've held the line or not. Sorry, can't tell you anything more.
Donna's wondering what the Latin name of the perennial lupin is versus the biennial, and I can't think of either one of them other than lupinus.
The perennial lupine is Lupinus perennis. So it's
I had perennis, but I didn't believe it.
The lupin that we grow, which is Steve's great uncle Axel's lupin, is Lupinus podophylla, podophylla. It's because it has multiple leaves. It has more leaflets on it. And it's the biennial. There are other lupins too, but those are the two that we showed and that most people grow. Well, most people don't grow Lupinus perennis. We've tried it in a number of places, and unless it's got real great drainage and deep sand, like in the oak savanna that Brenda's talking about, or a oak pine barren, you're just not going to have enough right conditions for it.
But fortunately, we do.
Yeah, which is really cool.
No current questions right now.
This is the late lilac just coming into bloom, and it literally, that's its common name, late lilac. It's lilac syringivellosa, and it's just coming into bloom. We have both the common lilac, which is done blooming, and the late lilac that's starting now, because there are a lot of butterflies that nectar on this, and the hummingbird comes to it.
Hummingbirds love it.
Yeah, we see it there. See it there a lot. Okay, then let's go to here, because it's a good time to talk about when we're talking about our geekiness over butterflies. Mary Ellen sent these pictures. She said, look what came into my garden up north this year.
I am so jealous. That woodpecker I would love to have. The deer, I've seen enough of those.
But it's so cool when the fawn is there. Yes. You can walk right up to it.
It won't move.
The fawn was told by mom, you stay there, don't move, don't let anything bother you. I picked them up and moved them out because the mother put them inside an open fence that was going to be closed. And so when I got done at the end of the day, I picked them up and moved them outside the deer fence and made a space that looked about the same. We didn't find any blood or fur or anything like that at the next day, so we figured that it was okay. The woodpecker.
The fawn hardly moved.
Yeah.
Hardly moved. We have pictures of it. We could show it someday.
Yeah, we have the woodpecker is a pileated woodpecker, which some people call pileated, but pileated is more correct. And this is the woodpecker that Woody Woodpecker was based on. This is a big woodpecker. This is bigger than a crow. It is a big woodpecker. And when it hits a tree, it goes flop, 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 flop. You can't miss it. And I'm jealous that Mary Ellen has them in the yard. All right. So anyway, it's great to have them in the yard, and we love these kinds of things. This is what's fun about gardening, is seeing them come into the garden. And even though we hate it that the deer come in and eat things, and they eat them just as they're going to open up, it's so neat to know that there are other living things out there, and there are so many of them. That's why we get excited when we see this. Some people say, "Oh my gosh!" My friend Burdette used to say, "They're worms eating my pearly everlasting." I go, "Well, they're not worms. If you pull that apart, you're going to find this guy inside." And that's the American lady butterfly. She's orange and brown and a little bit of black. And she's been laying eggs out in our front yard for, when did we see her? In middle of April already. She was out there. And they knit the leaves together on that tip and eat the new growing tip as it comes up. And this is frass or excrement that builds up in there. We're just really pleased to see it. We have plenty of pearly everlasting. We put it out there for them. So to have some of the tips eaten, and sometimes to have a lot of them eaten. There's one there, there's one there, there's one there, one there. The birds are going to find some of them. We know they will. There are times when we've taken kids out to see, and one that was there yesterday isn't there anymore. But to have them around is great.
In our old garden, it would have been 35, 40, 50% damage. We're just establishing this garden that this is a place you guys could come and be safe.
Yeah. And we also have the pussy's toes. You saw a close-up of these pussy's toes a little while ago. The pussy's toes is a flat on the ground ground cover, native ground cover, which is native in this area. It literally was there. We found it and we put it out, and they're eating the leaves down below on this. And if there are enough of them, they'll begin eating the flowers too. We love it. We just love it. It's what those things are there for. And I love it. I tell people, leave the leaves. You're looking at a fir needle and debris in the leaves that I poured all over the garden in the fall. And here we are now this week. And do you see who's there? She spent the winter in there. And she's coming out now and after scale insects. And we want them to eat the scale insects. They are vicious predators, ladybugs. I've seen
Yum, yum.
I have seen movies by the bug lady, one of the professors at, I think it's Penn State, but they call it State College, Pennsylvania. She does micro videos, and these ladybugs take 3 steps, grab an aphid, bite out its belly, kind of like a bear biting a salmon. And then they throw the ladybug to the side and they take 2 steps and grab another ladybug. They grab another scale or aphid and bite out its body. And one ladybug will eat 30 or 40 aphids a day. You can't get a better control than that, especially since they wintered over near where they were doing well that year. So I'm glad to see those. I was digging to plant some bulbs. This is a drain spade or a trenching spade. It's a long, narrow spade. And I was planting some annual bulbs because, of course, we talked to Brent Heath a couple of weeks ago, and I've always wanted to try spider lily above our hostas in the summer, and he confirmed that yes, even though they won't winter over, they'll still bloom. So I was digging deep down, and as I came up toward the surface litter, look what's in there. Now, they were mostly oak leaves that I put back there, and I suspect that these are all one or another of a sawfly that lives on oak. There are so many insects that live on oaks. Oaks are important,
Yep.
very important plants in the community because they support so many insects and support so many birds. So I looked at all of these and said, boy, you guys are fat. And so I took my shovel over and I put them underneath one of Steve's feeders. I said, here, let the wren and the bluebird get these guys. So when you see the robin hopping around in your mulch, and I love watching them do this, they'll pick things up and throw them. They're disturbing the mulch and finding things like this, and that doesn't happen if you treat things with pesticides. I didn't show you this, Steve, and it's not a great picture, but while I was out there dragging that spruce around and getting the pond opened up, I saw this ant carrying something. Well, what are you carrying? That's a bird dropping. The ants are cleaning up the bird droppings, Steve, and taking them away. Hey, don't you love it? And Sonia sent us a picture to say that her overwintered black swallowtail butterflies have emerged, both 2 males,
Oh.
like say the females have more blue than this on them, but they both emerged. She found 2 chrysalises in the fall and kept them in the shed over the winter, and there they are. They're going to be flying earlier than ours were. The plants that these live on are dill, fennel, parsley. We've seen them on lovage. The plants that are in the carrot family, carrots, Queen Anne's lace live on. And I didn't show you this one either, Steve. This is on the 9 bark, just one of them. Look at this cool beetle. I think he's one of the oil beetles, and I'm going to have to figure out what he is.
Yeah.
Just resting there.
At first, I thought it was a black vine weevil, but no, it's not.
And it's much bigger than that. Real
Yeah.
big and warty, and I mean, look at those grabbers.
Yep.
Think of oil beetle. And he was sitting right at the top of the 9 bark, and the oil beetles do that. They sit at the top of something and wait for a bee to come by, and they hitch rides on bees to other places, which I think is pretty cool. And because all things like this are happening this week, Janet Shank sent us an article, shared a copy of the New York Times article about a tree cutter in North Carolina who has a book. Shoot, I should have put that in. I didn't think of that. Who has a book that you can order online. He just charges what it costs him to reproduce the book about why you might leave dead trees. So we have this dead spruce. We're doing a lot of work on the trees in our yard, slowly, gradually, because we have a lot of pines and spruces like this wiggly trunk you see back there that were planted way too close together or emerged way too close together. This is a native red pine back there. And were allowed to stay, and now they're very weak. So a couple of them snapped off, and the neighbors asked, well, why didn't you take that one down too? Well, because that's an important tree. A lot of things happen around dead trees. The woodpeckers live in them. If the tree is in a place where it's not going to fall on something and hurt something, then you can leave it. And there are good notes in this tree trimmer's book. I'll have to send that out in our next free-for-all invitation about how you can tell whether or not the tree is probably safe, or you can have an arborist tell you if it's safe or not.
Yeah. See, Janet, go back and show oh, you can go to the next picture. It shows where we cut the tree that affected the
moose, the striped maple.
moose wood.
Our striped maple crown is right here, and this half of the crown, the leaves died back and are only pushing out now. And that's because this pine right here snapped during a storm. Just too much foliage on the too skinny trunk way at the top, and it snapped and fell over. And this one was in the same condition. So we took both of those down to just stumps. We're leaving the stumps that are safe. And we left this spruce as a stump, and we've hung pieces of birch on the trunks of these trees because we'd like more places for chickadees to nest. And chickadees love to get into birch that's decaying, and we've watched them hollow it out. It's amazing to watch them do it. They'll come out of the hole that they're making and fly away before they drop the sawdust to not make it evident that there's something going on there. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Robin says that up by Mulla Lake, they had the pileateds put 3 large rectangular holes in one of their trees.
Oh yeah, once they find something, they will rip open a tree. I have seen huge damage from pileated woodpeckers when they're after something. There's something underneath the bark if they're doing that.
Robin wonders if that tree will probably die. It's damaged for sure.
Yeah, whether it'll die really depends on how healthy and vigorous the tree is, how much of the cambium was disturbed, because trees can live through an incredible amount of damage.
They really can.
Yeah.
We've seen that ginkgo by Sue's.
Yeah, it's not the depth that matters so much. It's how much of the circumference of the trunk was involved.
Donna says Cranbrook Garden Club had excellent wildflowers for sale today. She thinks it might be open tomorrow. Yes, we've gotten wildflowers from that.
Yes, we have. And
they are good.
And I think today might have been the Members' Day.
Yep.
And tomorrow it's open to the public. It is a feeding fest. It's a feeding frenzy is what it is. The volunteers at Cranbrook are pretty well connected with builders and developers. And when someone is developing a property, and they're connected to them, they'll walk the property and look to see if there are any wildflowers, and then get a permit to harvest those wildflowers and bring them back to either sell or plant in Cranbrook's gardens. So it's a good way to support something that is done in the hope of restoring an environment, or moving, what do they call that? Well, they're fixing it up. You're just putting a replacement in. We had another follow-up, which reminds me, and a follow-up that I felt a little bit bad because Anne had asked us about these lilacs at her church. She said, they're not looking good. And we looked at it and told her, well, they're not. That's oyster shell scale, and that's a really heavy infestation. They're sucking the life out of that lilac. I'm not surprised that it's not blooming and that parts of it are dying back. And she said, well, what can we do about it? And we had explained then about dormant oil before it leaves out. And see, it's already leafed out here. Before it leaves out, the scales that you see there are all dead bodies with underneath them eggs. Once it leaves out, the same time it leaves out, they're timed exactly. The eggs hatch and the crawlers come out. And what you want to do is have the oil on the tree so that the crawlers emerge through a film of oil and it smothers them. Once they're out, it's much more difficult to kill them. But if you want to get a handle on this problem, then at this point, using an insecticide that's a systemic, or one that sprays the entire plant, branches and leaves, is important. And it has to be done in a few days after it leaves out, because that's as long as the crawlers are vulnerable to sprays. But there are other things that you can do. You can say, what's wrong here in this situation? Why is this lilac so badly infested with this scale? It had to have been stressed by something. Either the roots are running into a problem, or there's heat coming from somewhere, or there's been damage to the roots by digging. Something's happened, and if you can make the plant more vigorous, you're going to be much better off. You can also order ladybugs, and on a dry day, it's important that it's dry all around. You wet down the lilac, just hose it all down so that it's wet, and release your ladybugs on it. They're always thirsty when they've been shipped around the country, and they'll stay on the moist place and find the scale, and they'll do a really good job for you to clean things up. But you have to decide what's important to you in what you can do. You know, how important is the lilac in terms of you're using pesticides around a community property like that. And she said, I'm overwhelmed by all of the decisions that you need to make. I hate to leave someone with that kind of thought, but it is true that there are a lot of decisions to make, and it works that way with everything. And in the spring, it's especially urgent, everything. I had been talking with someone about boxwood leaf miner, boxwood leaf midge, that this insect lays its eggs in the foliage of the boxwood. The insect emerges from the egg and eats inside the leaf all year and all winter, and then emerges out of the leaf in the spring and starts the cycle over again. Well, I had been talking to her about it and got kind of hung up on 9-bark mildew and researching that, and oyster shell scale. I forgot about the boxwood. This is a boxwood that we've shown you before, if you're one of our webinar subscribers, that I mistakenly planted under the overhang. I didn't even think about it when I planted it, but it, unlike the other boxwoods 3 feet away, was badly infested with leaf miner and not looking good, and it was smaller. And then I realized, oh, so I moved it last year, and I was going to cut off all of those leaves. Here it is. I'm setting it up. I've put a blanket, a sheet around it, got my little stool and my clippers so I can clip it all off. And then I looked at the first leaf that I clipped off. I broke it apart, and there's the midges, the leaf miners insides. And miner means that they eat inside of something. And when I looked at them, I thought, oh, they're supposed to be all orange. I know the picture is grainy because I can't take a good close-up, but can you see that it is a pupa developing just like a butterfly caterpillar does? These are the wings that are developing. I said, oh no, they're ready to go. They're going to be in a day or so, they'll be out. And I looked at some other leaves and went, no, not in a day or so. Here's the chrysalis left behind, the shell of that pupa as they came out of the leaf. And sure enough, if you shake the bush, they're tiny gnats are already out and laying eggs, and they're only going to be laying eggs for a few days, and that's what you got to kill, is those. And I'm not about to spray pesticide. We've not sprayed pesticide in 48 years, and we're not about to start spraying pesticide. So
of any kind.
So I'm going to have to work on it as a matter of making that plant healthier, because I can see by the one just next to it that it would have been healthier if I put it out in a better situation. And a lot of these things rely on knowing what the plant is supposed to look like and what it's supposed to do. This is marsh marigold, and it grew in January, got killed back sometime in February. It grew again. It bloomed wonderfully with yellow flowers on it. I don't know why it decided to be where it is in our yard, but it is marsh marigold growing in our dry yard. And it's supposed to be dying back now. It's an ephemeral, like tulips and crocuses. It's going to be gone by sometime in June. And you have to know that this is not a problem. This is not a virus. It's not an insect attack on this spirea. This is a variegated spirea that we bought because it was variegated and we thought it was kind of cool. And if you don't know that, you might be trying to cure it of something. This might be a virus infection on this clematis, but more likely it's injury that happened because the leaf was developing a color, and then the temperature changed rapidly and the color didn't develop as well. We'll get into that when we get into the article that Gretchen sent us about chemistry of plants and colors. So you do have to know a few things, and that can be discouraging to some people, but I think it should be encouraging to people. It gives you more dimension, more levels to get to know your plants in your gardens, more exciting things to find out.
Jenna, we've got some questions about, is neem oil the same as dormant oil?
Neem oil can be used as a dormant oil. There are a bunch of different kinds of oils that are dormant oils.
And are those oils, those different kind, not considered pesticides then?
They are pesticides. Like all pesticides, there are different classes. There are classes that are acceptable to organic gardeners. Neem oil is one of them that's acceptable, that is developed from the oil of a root of a plant related to the lilac that's native to the Indian subcontinent. And it, by the way, is one of the only real ingredients that there is money being paid to the indigenous people who used that and developed its use for all kinds of things. So neem oil is one of the things that organic growers will accept. Paraffin oil, I think, is accepted by some of them. So some of them are based on paraffin, the lightweight oils, and then some oils are based on oil, on petroleum products. All of them can be called dormant oils if they're applied while the plant is dormant. So if I'm applying I can apply neem oil even during the growing season at a lighter rate if I'm trying to kill things by smothering them. Or one of the things that neem does is if it's on a leaf and the insect eats the leaf, the insect can't shed its skeleton, which means that it implodes. It can't get out of its own skin to emerge as the next size, which is another awful way to die, but it is the way that these things happen. Okay. Are there other questions, Steve? I'm sorry, I'm running.
Not right now. We've got about 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Then
so.
let's talk about the new gardener, because we'd like to see if we can help some new gardeners. Most of the questions that we get are more advanced. Of the medium and small perennials, by the way, that don't spread themselves around, candy tuft, false rock cress, creeping phlox, they get to be a bigger mass over time, but they do that gradually, and they don't spread by seed. And the shoot, they bloom afterwards. The helianthemums, this is one of the helianthemums, one of the early blooming ones. They're called rock roses, are also good ones to put in to do that. The veronicas also don't spread by seed, they just become a bigger clump. And the threadleaf coreopsis are good. They don't spread by seed, they just become a bigger mass over time. And they do it rather gradually and uniformly on all edges. So there's some other perennials that you can use. But I think we'd like to see if we can help more new gardeners. We know you are doing that individually. We know that you're out there talking to neighbors and people are asking you. A friend asked our daughter Sonia just this week, well, one of the other professors at the university said, I'd like to grow some vegetables and some flowers, but she didn't even know what a planter was. She didn't know what to do with seed. She didn't know all of those things. And we're talking at, without meaning to, we're talking at a higher level. So if we get a brand new gardener, what do you do to help them out? I've been working with my granddaughter. Bria's babysitting the dogs right now to keep them from barking while we're doing this. And I told her one of the things you have to do is develop an eye. You have to develop the ability to look and see the difference between leaves. Can you see the weeds in this picture? We're looking at Canadian ginger, celandine or wood poppy, the native Solomon seal, the oriental variegated Solomon seal, bloodroot, and ginger. Do you see any weeds in there? And Steve picked them out pretty quickly. There are maple trees coming up right here and here. And you need to be able to look, even though they're the same color, to recognize that the shape is different. So I took Bree out. We had a call to identify whether there was poison ivy on a particular property in our neighborhood. And I said, okay, now that's poison ivy. And Bree said, okay, I see it. And that's pretty good to be able to see it when it's in among its lookalikes. She did miss it growing up over here, but she saw it where it's creeping along the ground. So she was pleased with herself when she said, there it is, and this is in one of its lookalikes. When Virginia creeper is first coming up from seed, it will often have only 3 leaves. And there's the poison ivy. No, she's not touching it. There's actually space between her and poison ivy.
Yeah.
And
there was a question I missed about how do you get rid of Virginia creeper?
You weed it out.
Dig it.
Yeah, because it is a vine. It's a vine when it's crawling on the ground. It's a vine when it's going up trees. You cut it back and pull it up. It's where it's rooted along the way. Dig it at, usually it roots rather shallowly along the vine where it's laying on the ground. But keep digging it back to where its main point is, and then either cut it back and treat the stump with a herbicide, or what I do is dig the roots out and take it right out You can also just keep going back and every 2 weeks cut every sprout that comes off of it out. But you have to know that it's been dropping seeds. It is a grape family plant, and birds love it. It's been dropping seeds for years, so you have to then keep watching for the seedlings and pulling them up. There'll be a enduring weed in the area, but it'll be a seedling that you're pulling out.
Okay, sorry for interrupting, but glad I got the question.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. We came home then, and I said, okay, Bree, can you see the weed in here? This is epimedium or barrenwort. And Steve said I should flip the picture, but that's the way that it looks right there. There is a weed in there, and if you can see it, then you'll be surprised to know that my granddaughter said, I see it. I see where it is. That maple seedling's right there. We just moved the epimedium seed weed leaf a little to the side, and she pulled it out and then proceeded to help me pull out maple seeds. And she said to me, she turned and with a big grin on her face said, once I see one of them, I see a million of them. I said, that's the gardener's eye. And that's one of the things that we can do with new gardeners is just walk them around and identify things, point to things and say, this is, this is, this is. I don't think we do that enough. I think we jump into giving them plants and telling them to start seeds, and just if they can just appreciate the eye, that might be a great starting point for gardeners.
That's a good ending point for us. It's 8 o'clock.
And I think all the rest of the questions that we have here, I did talk to, email, text, all the people asked them. So individually, these have been answered. I know Nabil was here to tell us the great success that he had with finding the soil that he was looking for. We can come to those later, or what Steve and I are thinking about doing, and hoping we have time to do before the holiday, is to get a newsletter out with some of these things in it, because we need a way to reach people and tell them, join us on June 7th. We'll have a free webinar, and it's a stellar presenter in Pierre Benerup. So I think if you enjoy your plants right now, that'll make us feel good. And if you'll enjoy looking at them a little bit more, at some of the intricacies of the plants that are out there, that is enough joy in itself, and it'll last you a week until we come back, because we'll be here on May 24th. And if you want to share a photo or two, send them. Try to send them in full. Don't let your camera down, your computer downsize them. If you need to send one per email, that's okay. If you get them to us by Thursday, we can usually do something with them here on a Free4All Friday. And we do get to all of our emails one way or another to answer, because we learn so much from those, and we hope you're learning by us sharing them. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. See you next week.
See you next Friday.